at Earl Spencer, the ripping into the royal family?
Well, I think with a eulogy, it's not quite as hard-hitting as this, but clearly he is having much angst and emotion over his sister's death, and is clearly blaming the paparazzi and painting the whole media as Diana's murderer, basically. And I can well understand his feelings. And he also took a side swipe at the royal family, you might have noted, when he said, despite having the title of HRH yanked, you still continued and went on to better things, which was clearly aimed at the royal family, and I'm sure they took note of it.
Are you also at all surprised at this attack on the paparazzi, when everyone's saying no one was ever killed by anyone by having their picture taken, but in fact this guy was drunk and she was killed by a drunk driver?
There are a combination of factors, obviously. The speed of the car, the drunk driver, and if indeed paparazzi were zigzagging in front of the car. One of the lawyers for the photographers said, well, if they're news photographers, they do take pictures of accidents. And I said on a TV show, yes, but they don't cause the accident first.
David, from a historical standpoint, there have been a lot of complaints building over the years about the royal family, not starting with the divorce, but we heard it from them, and then the affairs that they've had and so forth. And each time the Brits continued to yell at the royal family, but in fact it brings in hundreds of millions of dollars in tourists, right? Mm-hmm. So one would think that based on that alone, the royal family is going to be around forever.
Yes, I think the events of the last week have shown the resilience of the royal family as much as anything else, their ability to bend, albeit perhaps for some taste rather belatedly, to the pressures of public opinion, but nonetheless to show that they are responsive to public opinion, that they can tap on public emotion while simultaneously mobilizing all the forces of history and tradition behind them.
Do you think we would have heard from the Queen on television? Would we have seen them out looking at the flowers had it not been for public pressure?
I think possibly not. Certainly the Queen has a vision of her own sense of duty, which is very much about rigidity and not expressing emotion, which she's communicated both to her son and indeed to a certain extent to her grandchildren. And she may have been much happier retaining that distance from the whole emotional spectacle, but certainly the advice of the Prime Minister and the public opinion which forced him to give her advice certainly pushed her towards that, and I think probably a good thing too for the long-term future of the monarchy and its stability.
Did you want to add something?
Well, I said, yes, basically, a friend of mine in London described it perfectly, that the royals had retreated to the castle of Balmoral and pulled up the emotional drawbridge. And basically, they were, public opinion pulled them back, particularly Tony Blair, the young Prime Minister, who was very pro-Diana. And I think without his pushing, none of this, the speech by the Queen and maybe the idea of the children walking behind the casket, would have happened. I mean, if the royal family had had his druthers, this would have been a very private ceremony, low-key, probably at St. George's Chapel at Windsor, not the grandeur of Westminster Abbey. But it was public opinion that clearly swayed them and has dragged them from being mired in the last century, kicking and screaming into the next one, and about time too.
The royal family certainly seems to have underestimated the popularity of Princess Di. What about you and people like you who watch the royal family? Were you surprised at the popularity of Princess Di?
Absolutely not. She was a living icon, a legend, and that legend, of course, with a tragic early death, will continue to grow. Diana touched so many people, young and old, rich and poor. She was very tactile. She wasn't afraid to show compassion and emotion. And as we all know, most members of the royal family are about as flexible as breeze blocks. They do not show emotion.
As flexible as what?
Breeze blocks, building bricks.
Oh, I see.
And what the public of England or Britain was crying out for was emotion, some compassion to show their grief with the rest of the nation. And as I say, they were dragged kicking and screaming into taking that act, into showing the respect to Diana in death that she clearly never got from the royal family in life.
But is this part of the royal upbringing, though, Richard, the stiff upper lip and all that sort of thing?
It certainly is. Prince Charles, as you know, is a very rigid person, as is the Queen. They do sympathize, but they don't show it. And people wanted the visual of the royal family showing grief, showing respect. But I think at least with the children, William and Harry, they have been imbued with their mother's characteristics and traits and will show compassion and will show sympathy. And I think that bodes well for the royal family in the next century. In fact, Diana's death, sadly, will benefit the royal family because William is vastly popular with the young people, which of course is the core base of the royal family into the next century. And of course, he is Diana's son, the son of the legend, which, as I say, will only grow with her death.
Now, what about, how does this affect Charles' ascendancy to the throne?
Well, it doesn't, but my speculation on this is a catch-22. Charles can either marry the woman he's loved for 25 years and is besotted with, Camilla Parker Bowles, or he can become king. He cannot do both because the public would not support that. My particular hypothesis on this is that But the Queen Mother's 97, the Queen is 71, he's going to be 50 next year, so barring ill health or any accidents, he won't come to the throne until he's at least 75 or 80. I think it makes very good sense for him to renounce the throne, marry the woman he loves. William will then be 40, very young, hopefully very popular, and ideally placed to be a young monarch with a much more streamlined monarchy ready for the next century. The perfect scenario.
Now, you have said that, that in a way, David, that this death strengthens the... how does it do that?
I think by showing really that the monarchy may be rigid but it's not inflexible. It can always learn from its mistakes, if one wants to put it that way. It can always learn from public opinion in particular. The monarchy, as we know over history of the last couple of hundred years, has always recreated itself at moments of stress and crisis, particularly in warfare, but also during the family happenings within the family itself.
But do you think the public really, really believes that this was a true emotional outpouring on the part of the royal family, or done strictly for public relations?
I think they can see that public opinion had an effect on that, but not strictly purely for public relations. The conception of duty and emotionlessness which the Queen has upheld is something which people can respect from a distance but not identify with, and I think Richard's absolutely right. The idea that the monarchy has to become in some ways more emotional, more like a family, as it's always touted itself to be, will become much clearer from this. I think if we imagine, for example, what Diana's reaction to the death of another member of the royal family might have been under similar circumstances, she would have led the way, and certainly the stolidity shown by her own son is entirely understandable under these terrible circumstances, but we might see a more emotional monarchy, perhaps one might say a more bourgeois monarchy, similar to some of the monarchies of continental Europe, which have reached out further to the people by, as it were, lowering their sense of social status, seeming less aristocratic and becoming more part of the people in that way.
Gentlemen, thank you. If we get a chance, we'll come back and...
Family, referring to